What's going on, guys? So today we're looking at the Gerber Suspension, which this is actually going to be one of their cheaper models in the lineup. This one you can usually have for around 35 bucks. This is also available on Black Friday 2017 for about 20 bucks at Home Depot. That's actually where I got this one, got it at a great deal. And for the money, I'm actually really happy with it. It's not quite a full size. There's definitely a lot larger multi-tools out there, but it does fill the hand nicely. For a size comparison, I would compare it similarly to the the Leatherman Wingman, which overall length, when it's closed up, is very similar. The height is fairly comparable until you get to the back here. The Gerber is significantly larger. And as we go through this, I'll try to show you how they stack up and see where one shines over the other. But starting off with the primary use of it, going to be the pliers and the wire cutters. It does have a decent set. The lineup's a little less than perfect. I'm not sure how well you can see that here. They are a little bit offset from one another, so the finish on that's not perfect, but again, it's a cheap multi-tool. You can't really complain too bad. The pliers, they are fairly sharp. Same thing with the wire cutters. They do work. Again, it is a multi-tool, as I mentioned before in the Wingman review. It really is a jack of all trades, master of none. So you can't expect perfection. You're not going to take this to work if you are an electrician or something of that nature. But I will show you how those work in just a moment here. Alright, so again, just taking a piece of home audio speaker cable, just showing you how well it's going to cut. You pretty much have to make one cut from either side of this stuff because it is going to be a little wider than the actual jaws of the cutters. But again, after one cut, you really just get a bit of a notch to it, similar as what you would expect out of the Leatherman. To show that as a point of comparison, so playing on the same playing field, you're pretty much getting the exact same cut out of both of them. So I wouldn't say either one is a good set of wire cutters. I would much rather have ones that have the carbide tips that are replaceable. These are pretty much going to be the standard generic ones that you see on most multi-tools that never really work that good, but they will work in a pinch. But beyond that, that's pretty much what you can expect out of most of these multi-tools around the size range. But again, one thing I do like to note is it does have a tight enough grip at the end that if you did need to use it for something like picking off a tick or something where you need almost tweezers but a little more robust, it'll definitely work well. Same thing, you can pick up small pieces of wire, things of that nature. Now, moving into the individual tools, one thing I like about this is that all of the individual tools on both sides lock. So what you see is on both sides you have a crossbar which you can pull back by two fingers, and that releases the tools. So to open them, you can open them one finger where possible, and they automatically lock on their own. Now this is going to be the standard primary knife blade, and that's one of my biggest complaints about this, is it is a very small primary blade, which for a point of comparison, that's how small you're looking. It'll work. It's a utility blade, it'll cut things, it'll open boxes, and it'll hold an okay edge. For a point of comparison, on the Leatherman, you have a little bit more robust of a blade. You actually have the partial serrations, which I'm not a big fan of, but it is a much larger edge. Now, one thing to consider is that the non-serrated portion of the blade is actually larger on the Gerber, because if you exclude the serrations, you have more usable plain edge on the Gerber there. And plus, it's a nice flat, straight edge with almost a bit of a sheep's foot design there, so it's going to hold an edge decently and be very easy to sharpen. Now, to close that, I find it easiest to use your middle finger and your thumb. Pull back the lock. I don't find it's very conducive to pulling back one thumb. Some people might find that more convenient, but I like to go two fingers and then just push down on the blade with your index. Now, the reason I mentioned that it's the same amount of usable space on the plain edge is because if you flip this over, you actually have a serrated edge on here as well as a standalone knife, which you get about the same size blade, but it's full serrations except for that last maybe 1/4 of an inch at the tip. So this is kind of good if you want to have that as an option available, so you want to be able to cut some rope occasionally, but you really don't like a serrated edge, and you're kind of like someone like me who doesn't really want that on your primary blade. This is a nice way to go. With that said, I would much rather have had a full-size plain edge blade and then maybe a similarly sized serrated blade here. But that's something for personal preference. you either love that or you hate it. I would have just liked to have seen a larger blade there. So next up we do have the flathead screwdriver, which I do like that this actually locks. Unlike the center drive they have now, it doesn't have the centered screwdriver. So if you are using it as a screwdriver, you will find that it will spin around and not be a centered screwdriver handle. Again, this also does work as a decent pry bar as well. And then same thing, we have the Phillips head, which I do kind of like the way they design this because it is a little bit of better tapering that you find than a lot of screwdrivers to compare it to. It is very narrow because, let's face it, it is on a multi-tool, but it holds a Phillips head screw fairly well. So I've been pretty happy with that. Next up we have the saw, which this one is a little bit weird to get out there. It doesn't really have a finger groove like you would normally expect to see there. You kind of just have to wedge your thumb in there and pry it up, or use your thumbnail in the tip. Now, the saw blade leaves a little bit to be desired. While it is small, it does work. So, if you remember a recent video I did on the Victorinox Farmer, I was able to do a saw blade test on that, and basically within a few seconds I was able to cut that notch right there, which, if I can get that to focus in the camera, wasn't great, but it worked. This is just this piece of old southern yellow pine. It's not going to be like you're cutting green wood. But to do the same test, you can kind of see when it does bite, you are able to remove some material. Now, I'm not nearly as impressed with this the saw blade as I was with the Victorinox, and even that left a lot to be desired. But again, it is a multi-tool, so you kind of take it all with a grain of salt. If you were making a figure 4 trap or something like that in the woods, you just needed to make a notch, that would actually work pretty well. And though it isn't the fastest cutter, nor the neatest, it's not for fine woodworking, it's not for production use, it's really for something to use in a pinch. So, it's something it's nice to have on there, though I could have been done a little better with the way they ground those teeth. Then moving on to the other side again, we have the can opener here, which I believe that'll also function as a bottle opener in the second portion here, because they do not give it as a standalone, so you kind of have both your openers in one tool, which is kind of a neat way to save some space. And as I always mention, I've tested these out. They do work well as a can opener. Let's face it, most people are not going to use it for that on a regular basis. More just if you needed one in a pinch, it would work. The bottle opener is going to see a lot more use. And this is the type that you tend to need to pry it from 2 points. It's not a nice wide bottle opener like you would normally see at a bar, where you can basically just pop it off in one try without mangling the bottle cap. But again, it does work. And for an EDC item, it's actually nice and convenient to have on there. And then if I can get my finger in here, this is another one that I'm kind of having a little bit of trouble having enough dexterity in my fingers to actually get that out of the knife. We do have the fine tip screwdriver. Great for small, fine use tasks. Not really good pry bar, but great for a small flathead screwdriver. This is the one that I've actually never used, but is really convenient if you are that type of person. It does have a lanyard loop on the back that you can either leave exposed or put it away, and that I really do like about this. You don't really have the same design on the Leatherman. You pretty much just have it extended and protruding from the rear. You could put a lanyard through the back. I kind of like this design a little better, but again, that is personal preference. And then finally, we do have the scissors, which these are pretty decent. The way they pop out is a little bit slower than you find on some other designs. Especially the Leatherman for comparison, because that's what we're using it up against today. On the Leatherman, you basically pop it right out, and once you engage it, it's going to be spring-loaded and work pretty well. The springs are a lot stiffer on the Gerber than on the Leatherman, but the cutting surface on the Leatherman is going to be larger. This one works very well one-handed. This one is going to be a little bit more compact, a little bit less meat in your hand, because more needs to stick up to get your thumb in place. So I would give the edge to the Leatherman in this situation. I also like that you actually can store the scissors closed on the Leatherman, where on the Gerber, you actually need to open them up to get it to close fully. So the likelihood you're going to get some crap on your edge and is just a little higher likelihood, and it doesn't really protect them as well, but it does protect the edges, so you're not going to be dulling the edge when it's up against anything else in your pocket. The only other thing to note is that they chose to give you a nylon pouch as opposed to putting a belt clip on the back of the multi-tool, which for me, I never use either one, so it's really a non-issue for me. The good thing about this one is it can be looped through a belt either direction, either horizontally like this, or you could run it vertically like this and run it on your belt, or on a pack or something like that. But for me, I'm just going to toss it in a pocket, toss it in the bottom of a backpack. I don't really need to worry about either one of these things, so that is something to keep in mind, but for me, it's again a non-issue. Unlike some of the larger multi-tools, you do not have a bit kit with this because it is not designed for one, so that's also another thing you don't need to worry about putting inside this case because there's no need for it. But overall, I've been very happy with this. So if you are looking for a cheaper multi-tool, something around, say, $35 range, you'd be happy with either one of these. Which one you should go with, it's really personal preference. I like some things better on the Leatherman, and I like some things better on the Gerber. The locking setup is definitely better on the Gerber. I like the primary blade on the Leatherman better, and I like the fact that the Gerber does have a saw. So all things considered, if I were to buy one of these, I don't know which I would pick because they are both good tools. I think I would probably have to give a little bit of an edge to the Leatherman for the fact that it is lighter. And this one is definitely a noticeable heavier amount. Now, if I were to give another one a try next, I would probably say something as the Wave would be the best way to go, but if you're looking for something on the cheaper end, they do have a similar model to the Wingman. I forget the name off the top of my head, but it does have a folding saw built in, similar to the suspension from Gerber, but it is going to be a little more expensive. But I'm kind of curious to see what you guys think. Which one do you guys like better? And if you could only pick one, which would you pick? So let's put that in the comments section below and see what we get for a consensus here. But as always, if you have any questions, put them in the comments section below, and please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.